Hello, and thank you for joining today's session, Demystifying ROI for Commercial Events, How to Define and Calculate ROI with Confidence. I'm your speaker today. My name is Brad Gillespie, and I appreciate your time and investment with us today. Just to go over a few housekeeping items to start, on the right side of your screen in Attendee Hub, you can join the chat, submit questions in the Q&A, and please take a moment to fill out the survey upon completion of today's session. Today is being recorded, and we will have live questions at the end. So please submit your questions. We'll address as many of those as we can at the end of the session today. We certainly appreciate any of your feedback that you may have. We want to make all of these sessions better each time we do them. So please submit the survey at the end. You can also register for any upcoming webinars that CVent is offering. And lastly, to download the slide deck as well as an accompanying workbook, you'll click on the details link in Attendee Hub in the bottom right and view the full session details link where you'll be able to access those two documents. Okay, so let's get into our topic today. I get to lead a team at CVent called CVent Consulting, but before that, I ran two different marketing teams here at CVent, including the events program. So this is something that's near and dear to my heart, this topic of ROI. We talk about it every year, and in particular this year, it's even more important because, as many of you know, watching recent headlines, our industry has seen a number of recent layoffs and declines in workforce. And we think that's in large part to a program and a program leader's ability to demonstrate impact and ROI. So that's what we're really going to be getting into today. So why is ROI as a topic so important? Well, we think it's important to be able to answer a number of key questions about your program that ROI helps us do. Should we continue the event or the program, any one program or any one event in your overall program? Should you increase or decrease investment in that event or that program? How does this event compare to other events in your program? And how does the entire events program compare to other marketing channels that are available to you? Last but not least, how does ROI impact goal setting? In our session today, that's one of the key points I think you'll get out of this, is to really understand how understanding ROI helps you set better goals. So our aim for today is to answer those questions and leave you with the ability to define commercial event types. We're going to break that down and help you understand what those are and what that means. Help you understand the key metrics and KPIs for commercial events. We're going to help you understand how to build the right model for your organization, because every organization has a slightly different ROI model. We'll show you how to calculate ROI for an example commercial event. And then last but not least, how to set the right goals. So before we get started, let me spend just a moment discussing metrics and KPIs and how they can be sometimes confused. Simply put, metrics are units of measure. All KPIs are metrics, but not all metrics are KPIs. KPIs should really highlight the most important things about your program. ROI is simply a KPI. It happens to be the most mature KPI possible, we think, but it's just one of the many KPIs. And along this journey and along this path to developing ROI, you will be able to build other KPIs, some of which may be just as important as ROI. So let's get started. And each time I do these each year, I like to pick an example company to be our muse for this exercise. And so we've got a great example that we're using this year, our friends over at Waystar Royco. So if you happen to watch the program, you'll get this pretty quickly. If not, I'll catch you up. At Waystar Royco, there are a number of different holding companies. Each of those has some version of this internal and external events program. Internal meetings include events like this: investor meetings, town halls, departmental trainings. Those are all internal meeting programs. What we're talking about today are external events, what we're going to call commercial events for this talk today. Those are conferences, trade shows, sponsorships, field events, even all the way down to the individual sales dinner. This is what we're going to call today commercial events. Commercial events have a couple of different ways that we're going to define them. Any event that creates revenue by selling tickets, sponsorships, exhibitor fees, training, and the like, and any event that influences revenue by serving audiences with customers, prospective customers, or partners. Very simple definition for what commercial events are. No doubt you have some version of these in your organization today. Commercial events have certain objectives. This is a common list. None of this list should be too surprising to you. It includes things like sales, brand awareness, leads, opportunities, and then some that may be a little more obscure, some that you may not have had as much experience with. Renewals and customer retention, helping drive product adoption, helping increase customer advocacy, and then relationship building. No doubt when most of you think about your commercial events, there's one more important objective than the rest of these, and that's sales leads. And in our example today, we're going to go into quite a bit of detail on the common misconceptions about how to think about sales leads with ROI and how to do that better by taking the exercise just a little further beyond sales leads. So each of these objectives comes with it a number of different metrics. And this is not the complete list of metrics, but this is just an example. Each one of these has multiple metrics, and some of which we're going to go over those in detail today. So the metrics include things like number of units sold to represent sales. For awareness, we might think of the number of impressions that your event creates, so on and so forth. For each of these metrics, for this exercise around building an ROI model, and this is where the effort goes in, and this is where it can be tricky, we have to develop and calculate an assigned value for each of those metrics, for each of those objectives. That's ultimately how we will build the ROI model. So let's dive into it. Let's start with a basic ROI equation that we have used for years at Cvent and that we're going to use for today's exercise. I will say that ROI models can be somewhat nuanced. Your ROI model for your organization may be different than anybody else's, but this common way of calculating ROI is pretty universal. And so it will serve us well in our exercise today. The basic ROI equation goes like this. We want to think about the income that our investment, in our case, an event or an event program creates, and we want to subtract the investment it took to produce that event or that program. We're then going to divide by the same number, investment, and that's how we get to ROI. Let me walk through a basic example where income for our event was $1,000. Our investment to produce the event was $700. That leaves us with a $300 return on investment. We divide that amount by $700 and we get this decimal, 0.428. We usually like to express ROI as a percentage, so we multiply that by 100 and we get the ROI percent here of 42.8% return on investment in this scenario. Income minus investment divided by investment equals ROI. That basic equation is what you'll have to get comfortable with and what you'll start getting comfortable with today. So let's go forward. Of all of these things that can be calculated into an ROI model, in the essence of time and as a starting point, what we're going to focus on today are some of the most basic ones that are present in any event. And in our scenario today, Waystar Studios is participating in the NAB show. This is a third-party trade show with some programming, and Waystar is going to have a presence there and spend some money with some very specific objectives in mind. In this exercise, we're going to talk about sales, sales leads, and opportunities. Again, we could calculate all of these because for each one of these objectives, we can calculate an assigned value. But for this exercise, we're going to go with three that I think are the most common and perhaps the most important in all commercial event programs: sales, sales leads, and sales opportunities. So let's begin to focus on these for the remainder of our exercise today. But first, I want to ask a quick question, and you can respond to this question using the chat, and we'll also present this as a poll in Attendee Hub. Take a minute and contemplate this question. How are you currently tracking commercial metrics today? Are you tracking leads? Are you tracking both leads and opportunities? Is this something that's in process for your organization? You're not all the way there yet, but you're working on it, or have you not yet started? Take a moment and record that, and we'll address this at the end during our Q&A period. Okay, back to our exercise. So at Waystar Royco, as you know, we have a very bold leader in Tom and his trusty sidekick, Greg. So I mentioned at the top that one of the things that understanding ROI will help us do is set the right goals. Right now, Tom is handing down goals to Greg for the NAB show, like $1 million in sales that we can associate with the event. He's also asking for 100 sales leads, new sales leads, attributed to the NAB show. And Tom would like for the event to create at least $10 million in new sales opportunities. So this is a pretty common set of objectives that a sales leader might have in conversations with marketing and the events leader. Hopefully some of you have had a chance to be a part of some of these conversations, perhaps not with Tom, but just in general. So this is the scenario that we're going to work with for the NAB show. A goal and objectives for sales, a goal for objectives for leads, and a goal with the objectives for sales opportunities. So we went through an exercise just a minute ago using the ROI calculation where I showed you how to come up with the ROI for sales. We're going to assume for a minute that we are successful in creating $1 million in new sales. And I'll use the same formula that we used just a moment ago in our initial walkthrough of the ROI calculation, this time using the objective that was handed down to us, 1 million in new sales attributed to the NAB show. So again, return minus investment divided by investment equals ROI. So in this case, direct sales revenue of $1 million divided by, and we're going to imagine that the cost for NAB was $250,000. We're going to divide the difference, $750,000 divided by $250,000, the cost, and we get a 3.00 decimal. And again, we want to express ROI as a percentage most of the time. So we're going to multiply that by 100. And we see that we are left with a 300% ROI in this scenario on specifically the sales associated with this event. So that's one component of ROI that we're going to use in our equation. And as I mentioned, for now, we're just going to assume that we're going to meet that goal of $1 million. In a minute, we're going to break that down in a little bit more detail so we can really understand how we will get there at the end of the day. Let's pause and talk for a moment about the direct cost part of the ROI equation. So again, in our scenario, Waystar Royco has spent $250,000 on the NAB show. So let's talk a little bit about what that should include. Direct cost in the ROI equation should include any event expense directly related to achieving the revenue objective. It should include the venue cost, if any, food and beverage, advertising and sales, sales commissions for things that are commissionable, any technology that is directly related to the event, staffing and travel, and it may also include a pro rata share of expenses that are shared across events, but some of which are applied to this specific event or program. So each of you can think through what this might look like for any one of the events in your own program. But in our scenario, let's just add up those costs. Venue, food and beverage, let's say for 50K, advertising and sales commissions, a big expense, 100K, technology and staffing, technology 25K, staffing and travel 75K, and a percentage of the pro rata share. All of that totals up to our 250. And you need to be able to go through this in more detail. And most organizations we find have a much better handle on the cost side of the ROI equation, but we can also help you with that. We have some calculators that will help you make sure that you're capturing all of this spend as well. But in our scenario, this is how we would arrive at the direct cost. We're going to come back to sales a bit later, but now let's focus in on these two other objectives for the NAB show: the 100 sales leads and the 10 million in new sales opportunities. So this is where it starts to get a little more complex in our ROI calculation, but certainly not impossible. We're going to demystify this over the next 5 to 10 minutes and start to get you more comfortable with taking the conversation from sales leads to the actual value of those sales leads. So in our scenario, the 100 sales leads, like in any organization, are going to convert to an opportunity value. Our leader, Tom, wants that value to be at least $10 million. He has this number in his head about the value of the sales leads in his mind that he wants to associate and attribute to the investment in NAB show. Over time, those opportunities are going to convert to sales, some of them, but not all of them, obviously. So the whole idea in measuring ROI based on sales leads or even opportunities is to understand that we're talking about a future value that we can't predict. We want to understand how sales leads and opportunities at some point will become actual sales, the actual return on the return on investment. Until that time, when we can see this progression from sales leads to opportunities to sales, we need some way to calculate the value of sales leads and opportunities. So that's what I'm going to focus on next to help you solve this mystery. We're going to need a few data points to help solve this puzzle of what is the future value of sales based on a number of sales leads and a predicted number of sales opportunities. The first thing that we're going to need, that every one of your organizations will have somewhere, is the average sale that is accepted in your organization. Every organization has it. I'm going to show you in a minute how we can calculate it if you can't get this piece of information. But most of the time, if you reach out to your colleagues in sales ops or revenue ops, or even the sales leader himself or herself, they should be able to tell you what the accepted average sale is for your organization. You may have multiple average sales depending on if you have multiple products or multiple services that you're selling. Pick one that is most appropriate for the event in question based on what's being promoted and sold there. The second piece of information we need is a conversion rate. Just like average sale, every organization should have an understanding of how often and what percentage do sales leads convert to opportunities. This is a metric called lead to opportunity conversion that's usually expressed as a percentage. You need to ask your sales colleagues for this piece of information and expect that they should have it for you. Lastly, we need a second conversion rate, and this is the rate at which opportunities convert to closed won business. This metric is called the opportunity to sale or opportunity to close conversion, also called the win rate. Armed with these three pieces of information, we can start to apply some logic to the value of sales leads and the value of opportunities in the future tense. Because now, with data that your organization should have and accept, we can start to convert present value into future value. So let's break this down one more layer of detail. So again, if your teammate over in sales ops or revenue ops couldn't give you this average sale, we can calculate it on our own. To calculate it, we need to know the number of units sold and the total revenue sold. So in our scenario for the NAB show, as you recall, we're going to accept that we did sell $1 million in new services for Waystar Royco. And let's say that in our investigation, we determined that 10 new sales happened, 10 units sold. So we can do some very simple math and determine that our average sale is 100K in this scenario. Again, your organization should have this data point, but this is as simple as it gets how you would calculate that. Total revenue divided by number of units sold gives you the average sale. We do need to rely on our colleagues in sales ops or revenue ops to give us these next two pieces of data, starting with the lead to opportunity conversion. In our scenario, we're going to assume that 60% of all sales leads convert to opportunities. The first thing this shows us, back to the idea of setting the right expectations, is if we know that 100 sales leads are going to convert at 60% to opportunities, that only 60 of those leads are actually going to become opportunities. And using our average sale, we would calculate the value of those opportunities at far less than the 10 million in opportunity value that our boss has asked for. Only 6 million in this case. Armed with this information, this is our opportunity to raise our hand and push back on some of the goals and objectives that may have been set. With data that is accepted within the organization, we can have a different conversation. We could say, at this rate, we will not meet the goal of 10 million. But if we also have the opportunity to sales conversion number, we can play those numbers out. And this math suggests that of the 60 opportunities, using the provided 50% opportunity to sales conversion rate, 30 of those opportunities are going to move forward to become real sales at a value of $3 million. This lets us have a different conversation with our sales leader. We might be able to say, we may not meet that $10 million in opportunity goal, boss, but based on our data, this might suggest that we would win $3 million of new business. Is that acceptable? And it might be an opportunity to reset goals and objectives. Most oftentimes what we hear is, no, we're going to stick with those goals. We need the 10 million. And so what do we need to do to get 10 million in opportunities? Using the same data, the conversion rates and the average cost per sale, what this would tell us is our sales lead goal is too low to reach that target. We actually need 166 leads in this case to net 10 million in sales opportunities. And if the rest of our data plays out, that should result in 50 new sales for $5 million. This is a conversation between leaders of events programs and sales organizations that should be happening prior to every big event investment, both at budget season and as you're approaching the event itself. This is a great way to align on goals and objectives using data points that are accepted by your organization. There is no guesswork here. There should be no guesswork here. Every organization has these data. Okay, so what we just walked through is now, in addition to our scenario for the 1 million in new sales, that we're just going to accept as fact that the event can create that. We just talked about the two other most common scenarios for a commercial event: the value of sales leads and the value of opportunities. What we can now incorporate into the ROI model is the future value, which is actually the present value using our conversion rates, that these leads would convert to $10 million in new opportunities. And if they do that, they should result in $5 million in new revenue for the organization. There's a new metric that most organizations use to describe what we just walked through, and that's called a weighted opportunity. The weighted opportunity is the current value based on some of those agreed upon conversion rates and numbers that every organization has. You can use this value, the weighted opportunity value, and take it right back into our ROI model and represent the value of leads and opportunities very differently. So this was our original ROI equation using the $1 million in sales that we're going to assume flow from the event. And now what we can do is simply add the next piece of value, the $5 million in weighted opportunity, to the same equation. We added no additional cost in this scenario. The same cost to produce the same event, what we did, led to this outcome. And so rather than $750K in ROI, we now have a whopping $5.75 million in ROI, and we'll divide it by the same direct cost, $250K, and instead of the 3.0, it's 23.0, and we'll multiply that by 100 to get a percentage. And so now in this example, which is a terrific example, mind you, 2,300% ROI in this scenario, when we can stack the layers of value to include the weighted opportunity of sales leads and opportunities. Okay, I know that may have felt like a math lesson, hopefully at a level that was digestible to you. Let me summarize a few things here. In our scenario today, and again, there's many different objectives for commercial events, but in the ones that are most common that we suggest you start with first, every objective has a set of metrics. We talked about some of those today. For sales, we talked about units sold, total revenue, average sale. For sales leads, the number of sales, the value of those leads, and the lead to opportunity conversion rate. Those are all metrics. For opportunities, the number of opportunities, the value of those opportunities, and the opportunity to close ratio. And then lastly, and most importantly, ROI, total cost, dollar value of total benefits, and the ROI percentage. Where does this data live? Where will we get it? So if you are a CVent customer, the good news is we provide not 100%, but a good amount of the data that one would need to do this calculation. You need to have attendee data, lead data, event data, budget data. For most organizations, the rest will be in your CRM, and in some cases, the marketing automation platform. For things like conversion rates, for things like average sale, for things like total pipeline, this is a great opportunity, if you don't already have one, to start to build a relationship with your sales ops or revenue ops teammates. And again, everything that we've talked about today, you should expect that your organization has its version of these metrics. And if they don't, you should call us and let us help you have a different kind of conversation with your teammates and see if we can't be of help. So at the outset of the talk today, I said that ROI was perhaps the most important KPI that we can ever hope to have for any given event or your entire program, but it's just one of many really important KPIs. Many of these metrics can also be KPIs for your organization. And so on this path to building ROI and an ROI model for your organization, you're also going to learn a lot about the key metrics and KPIs that you should be reporting on as well. Okay, so let's see how we've done. What I hope to do is help you answer these questions to demystify ROI. And I think if you think about the scenario we went through, and if you have access to that data, the idea is that you could make a smarter decision about continuing an event, increasing or decreasing investment, how this event might compare to other events. For you marketing leaders out there that have more than the events channel, you can understand how event ROI compares to other channels to make decisions on where spend should go across channels. And last but not least, hopefully you can now see how understanding these metrics and KPIs should inform your goal setting. Okay, so before we go to Q&A, just a few things. Please take the survey. I would love your feedback to see if this made sense, the way we explained it, and it will certainly help us improve the next time we do this topic. In the session details, not only can you access the downloadable version of our talk, but we have an Excel-based worksheet that will greatly help you in these calculations. Last but not least, let us know how we can be of help. Our team at CVent Consulting has conversations like this every day. Now is an incredibly important time given the state of our industry and the pressure that we know is on you as leaders. So please let us help you. And last part before we go to Q&A, we have part 2 of this ROI series that's going to focus on internal meetings and events, scheduled for Tuesday, October 3rd, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hope you'll join us for that one. We're going to do the same exercise, but with a focus on internal meetings and events. And we're going to go into some live Q&A and look at those poll results. Okay, folks, thanks for sticking around until the end. I really appreciate the engagement. Those of you that started are all still here, which is always great to see. Do we want to start with the poll results, guys? Yes, let's start here. We asked that question, where are you today? And this is actually a positive for me to see greater than 50% that are doing a combination of leads and opportunities. Also not surprising that we have a fair amount that have not yet started. Hopefully, wherever you are on your journey toward ROI, you picked up some good information. So thanks for taking the poll. That's helpful. Let me go in to some Q&A, and what I think I'll do, guys, is just go right down the list. These are all good questions, and I think we can get to most of them in the next 10 minutes if those of you can stay on. So let me start with this one. In our business, the sell is a multi-million-dollar, likely multi-quarter, sometimes multi-year, I suspect, sale. During that time, the customer has several touch points with several people. So ultimately, when we get into a scenario where the event is part of an overall opportunity cycle, you can start to think about what role did the event play amongst others. And we get into this topic of attribution and attribution models. And without going too far into that, I would say if your organization is really keen to understand in a scenario where there's a lot of different touches, what is the value of the event touch? At some point, you're going to need some version of an attribution model. There's a bunch of them, but you're talking about a multi-touch attribution model to ultimately assign some value. What I usually, and as a CMO and as in our role as CVent Consulting, what we usually recommend is really just focusing on what you know about the event, and in a more qualitative way, being able to talk about the interaction, the information that was exchanged, the what you would get from your seller in terms of their perspective on how that interaction moved the deal forward. And just to start with, if you don't have this multi-touch attribution model, make sure you have good stories to tell around the opportunity to interact with a customer or prospect. The other point to make around a longer sales cycle is that every organization, just like you have some agreed upon average sale metrics, conversion metrics, you need to have an agreed upon time frame for which the event can take some credit for its touch. Usually, the bigger the sale, the longer the sales cycle, the longer the period where an event can take credit. But if you don't have that, I would suggest you start with something like 6 months, So if the event happens today, you would have 6 months to claim, I think, significant influence on a deal that were to close or advance. Doesn't have to get all the way to close if the opportunity started as a lead, and in that 6 month time frame advances to opportunity stage. The event should have some credit and should be factored into the ROI calculation. At a high level, that's how I would answer that question, and then we could get into certainly the specifics of your situation, but that's a good place to start. Here's a good one that we get very often. Unfortunately, you're not going to like the answer. Do you have any industry ROI benchmarks you can share? The state of the event industry as a channel is we're just getting started, frankly, for the same reason that many of us can't consistently calculate ROI. For that same reason, we don't have great benchmarks. Other channels like digital, direct mail, direct response, phones do have good conversion and ROI benchmarks, or at least better than events. So that the very least you can compare when you do this calculation to other channels. What I like to suggest here is, rather than worrying about benchmarks, try to do your models for your handful of events or event types that you know are going to be most important to do this for, and make sure they are at break even. If they are not at break even, we need to talk about how do we get them to break even. Once they're at break even, you can start to have conversations around investing more or less and comparing this investment to other channels. But I usually set as the first goal, do these calculations for the programs that matter and make sure they are at break even plus. And once we're there, we can start to have conversations around how does this investment compare to other events. If you get to that point, you can compare one event to another, one program to another, or talk to your CMO about how the events channel compares to other channels where you may already have some ROI benchmarks. Okay, let me find another good one. This is another common question we get, and it's in the lead to opportunity to close scenario. If we talk to someone in the show, but that company is already in the funnel, how do we count that? So you're going to need to be able to take, on the system side, essentially a snapshot in time that you can relate to your attendees that you engage with the event to see. Maybe you pull an opportunity report, maybe you pull a lead status report, and you compare where there are active leads or opportunities that you did engage with. So we're not going to attempt to try to count this individual or account as a new lead unless what you talked about at the event is different or new than the current lead or opportunity. There is a scenario where if I'm already a lead or an opportunity, but what I talked to you about at an event is different, that might be counted as a new lead for a new opportunity. Assuming that that's not the case, and assuming that we're going to be talking about the same thing, what we're going to want to do, similar to that previous question we talked about, is make sure that we're tracking the progress of that lead or that opportunity in the time frame that is agreed upon for your organization. And you're going to want to be able to have influence credit on whatever progression that is. Did the lead or the opportunity advance to the next stage or go all the way to close? And so again, you will have some influence on that. And that takes us back into the conversation of attribution. At some point, we will probably do an attribution series to take this further. In the meantime, if you want to get into some attribution model questions and how that relates, we'd be happy to take that up with you one-on-one. Looking for another good one or two. This is a good one on the cost side. And when we think about direct costs and who is staffing, I think you need to, we would typically think of the direct costs as the team that is directly responsible for producing the event. Event marketers, planners, on-site staff that are not sellers. So staffing takes on two sides, at least two sides here. The staff that is required, that is their job to support the event program, we think of as direct cost. The sellers, sales engineers, other SMEs that you use to staff the event, we think is indirect. In the calculator, by the way, that we're giving you, we break that out for you to show you how you would calculate a kind of pro rata share for both direct staff and indirect staff. And there's a little calculation that you'll need to do and some data points you'll need to get, but we show you how to break that down. So event marketing, event planners that are directly responsible for producing the event go into direct cost. Most other staffing cost goes into indirect. The exception would be maybe if you hired an agency, we would think of that as direct staffing cost. Good question on the cost side. For any of these questions, by the way, if what you feel is your org is a little more nuanced than the response I'm giving that I'm trying to genericize, just reach out to us and we can talk about it. Okay, good question. That's going to, I think, help us connect to our next webinar. How do you factor things in like employee growth and retention into event ROIs? In our next installment in the series, we're going to talk about this in particular. There's some engagement that your team that is supporting external events. There's a conversation we could have here, but generally when we're talking about employee growth and retention, it's going to be in how we think about internal meetings and events. So we're going to go into a good depth on employee engagement and essentially show you how to think about calculating the value of employee engagement. And if you come back for that series, we'll take that to, I think, a good level of detail. So hopefully you'll come back for that. And I'll throw it to our guys that are watching questions. If you guys see any other questions that you want to cover, maybe I'll ask you guys to surface them. But those are the ones that I spotted as good ones for us to cover. Okay. Well, I want to thank you all for your participation and your engagement and staying till the end. If I didn't get to your question, reach out to us. Make sure you are going into the event details to get the copy of the deck, as well as you should find an Excel file there that will help you start to calculate this. And as you're going through that process for your first event and you'd like to have some help, we'd love to talk to you about that. And until then, hope to see you on our next installment. And thank you again for your engagement. And for those of you that are receiving customers, thanks for being a customer. Hope to see you again soon.